We are now officially entering Lesson 3.1, Understanding Phase B. This is where we move from your strategic vision straight into gathering solid business architecture evidence. Let's keep this transition short and practical. I need you to remember that Phase B is where your entire governance vision is tested against how the organization actually works on a day-to-day basis. Strategy might define the ambition, but it's business architecture that shows us where decisions are made, where value is created, where data is produced, where accountability is missing, and ultimately where governance must be embedded. The absolute key message I want you to take from this lesson is that data governance cannot be designed from an organization chart alone. It must be deeply connected to business capabilities, value streams, processes, decisions, roles, and outcomes. Let's talk about what business architecture actually means in our context. At its core, business architecture explains how an organization creates value, how it makes decisions, how work is performed, and how accountability is assigned. Throughout Module 3, I want to remind you of our Phase B discipline. We are not designing data architecture or selecting tools yet. We are simply understanding the business foundation. Let's walk through the three main components. First, capabilities. In simple business language, this is what the organization must be able to do to deliver its strategy. Second, value streams. This describes how value flows from a trigger to an outcome for customers, staff, suppliers, or regulators. Third, the operating model. This details how people, processes, decisions, and responsibilities are arranged to make the work happen. Let's use Summit Retail Group as our anchor here. In retail, governance only becomes real when it touches customer journeys, product life cycles, merchandising, supplier management, store operations, distribution, finance reporting, and digital commerce. If your governance recommendation doesn't connect to those realities, it's far too abstract for this phase. I want to highlight that Phase B is not about writing a massive process manual. It is a highly structured way of understanding how the business functions. For data governance, this matters immensely because ownership, stewardship, standards, and controls must be placed exactly where the work actually happens. Before we move on, capture one implication for your portfolio output so you can build evidence that justifies where governance, accountability, and operating model changes are needed. Let's focus on the crucial transition from our Phase A vision straight into gathering Phase B business evidence. I want to build a highly structured understanding of this topic and its true business architecture implications for you. Always keep bringing yourself back to our Phase B discipline. We are not yet designing the underlying data architecture. We are not selecting software tools, and we are not writing the full final implementation roadmap. Right now, we are strictly focused on understanding the business architecture that our governance framework must serve. Let's walk through these transition points one by one. First, remember that Phase A successfully set our direction. The vision we built described exactly why governance matters and painted a picture of the future state Summit Retail Group wants to achieve. Second, Phase B is where we test that vision against business reality. You are now going to examine the actual capabilities, value streams, operational processes, and day-to-day responsibilities. Third, the findings we gather here will become our concrete requirements. The business architecture findings you document will translate into highly traceable requirements for the data and technology phases that come later. Let's keep Summit Retail Group as our primary anchor here. In a fast-moving retail organization, governance only becomes real through things like customer journeys, product lifecycle decisions, merchandising processes, supplier management, store operations, distribution logistics, finance reporting, and digital commerce. If you cannot directly connect a governance recommendation you've made to one of those tangible business realities, your recommendation is probably just too abstract for Phase B. The absolute key transition here is moving from strategic ambition to hard business evidence. Phase A might boldly state that Summit Retail Group needs trusted product and customer data, but Phase B asks exactly where those data problems appear in actual business work, whether that's product onboarding, pricing, customer service, campaign management, store operations, or finance reporting. Before we wrap this slide, please capture one implication for your later portfolio output. Your goal is to build the kind of evidence that clearly explains where governance accountability, data requirements, and operating model changes are actually needed in the real world. This slide addresses a fundamental truth: why governance absolutely must follow the business architecture. We need to build a deeply structured understanding of this concept and its business architecture implications. Once again, bring yourself back to the Phase B discipline. No data architecture design yet, no tool selection, and no full implementation roadmaps. We are purely understanding the business architecture that our governance must serve. Let's walk through the core reasons one by one. First, governance must serve business outcomes. An organization does not govern data just for the sake of governing data. It governs data to actively improve its decisions, operations, and control mechanisms. Second, responsibilities must sit within the actual business work. Ownership and stewardship need to align perfectly with the business processes and decisions that actually create and use the data. Third, our controls need natural insertion points. Quality checks, business approvals, and escalation paths should be embedded seamlessly right where the work already occurs on a daily basis. Fourth, our requirements need strict business traceability. Any later data and technology decisions we make must trace all the way back to these proven business needs. Think about Summit Retail Group as our anchor. In this retail organization, governance is realized through customer journeys, product lifecycle decisions, merchandising, supplier management, store operations, distribution, finance reporting, and digital commerce. If you find you cannot connect a governance recommendation to one of those business realities, it is probably too abstract to be useful in Phase B. I need you to understand that governance fails when it is designed as an isolated layer just floating above the organization. If a governance team creates new roles that simply do not match how the business processes flow, those roles quickly become purely symbolic. If controls are clumsily added outside of normal everyday workflows, they will get bypassed by busy staff. Phase B completely prevents this failure by physically connecting your governance to the business architecture. Please capture one implication for your later portfolio output right now. The ultimate goal is to build compelling evidence that explains where governance accountability, strict data requirements, and actual operating model changes are needed. Now we are going to focus on the Summit Retail Group business context. The teaching point here is to actively apply this Phase B concept to Summit Retail Group rather than just leaving it as some theoretical architecture idea in your head. Let me bring you back to our Phase B discipline. We are not yet designing the data architecture, selecting our tools, or writing the full implementation roadmap. We are understanding the business architecture that our governance strategy must serve. Let's walk through these practical points. Point 1 is all about context. Summit Retail Group operates physical stores, digital commerce platforms, merchandising, distribution, finance, and supplier functions, and they currently do this with heavily inconsistent data responsibilities. Point 2 is the decision phase. You must decide which specific business capabilities and processes must be examined thoroughly before you start recommending any ownership changes or new controls. Point 3 focuses on evidence. You need to capture business architecture evidence that clearly explains where governance should be embedded and exactly why. Using Summit Retail Group as our anchor makes this incredibly real. Governance has to touch the customer journeys, the product lifecycle decisions, merchandising, supplier management, store operations, distribution networks, finance reporting, and digital commerce. If your governance recommendation isn't tightly woven into one of those business realities, it is too abstract for Phase B. Summit Retail Group is intentionally designed to be complex enough to feel entirely realistic to what you will face in the field. Think about it. Customer data might be actively used by digital, stores, marketing, and customer service teams simultaneously. Product data could heavily involve merchandising, suppliers, e-commerce, and distribution centers. Finance reporting might depend on messy data pulled from multiple different operational processes. You must avoid the trap of assuming that the loudest stakeholder in the room automatically owns the problem. Before we progress, ask yourself and capture one implication for your later portfolio output. Remember, your goal is to build undeniable evidence explaining where governance, accountability, data requirements, and operating model changes are genuinely needed. This slide breaks down the core Phase B outputs you need for data governance. Our goal is to build a highly structured understanding of this topic and its deep business architecture implications. Point 1 is the capability assessment. This provides a clear view of which specific business capabilities actually depend on trusted, well-governed data. Point 2 is the value stream analysis. This is your hard evidence showing exactly where data is created, changed, consumed, or controlled all along the various business journeys. Point 3 is the process and decision map. Think of this as a highly practical map highlighting critical decision points, team handoffs, and vital data dependencies. Point 4 is the ownership and accountability map. This gives us a transparent view of actual business responsibility, stewardship roles, and escalation expectations. Point 5 is the business requirements register. These are the highly traceable requirements that will directly guide your Phase C and later design work. Let's tie this back to our anchor, Summit Retail Group. In a retail environment, governance becomes a reality through customer journeys, product life cycles, merchandising processes, supplier management, store ops, distribution, finance reporting, and digital commerce. If a governance recommendation you make doesn't directly connect to those business realities, it is simply too abstract for Phase B. I want you to know that these specific outputs are going to become a major part of your professional portfolio. They also create vital continuity across this entire course. The capability assessment directly influences your priority domains. The value stream analysis helps you pinpoint exactly where critical data elements, CDEs, and data quality rules may be needed. The ownership map actively supports your future operating model design. Finally, the requirements register carries everything forward into the data, application, and technology architecture phases. Please capture one implication for your later portfolio output now. You are building the evidence that explains exactly where governance, accountability, data requirements, and operating model changes are truly needed.